Okay. Is it, everybody's getting quiet like I was going to say something important and I'm not. So it's 9:30. There we go. It's fantastic. Uh, nice, nice, cool morning to get everybody going today. That's great. Invigorating. Supposed to be just a beautiful day. A beautiful day. When I was growing up, the congregation I worshipped at, there was old an older gentleman. He was one of the shepherds there. Uh, McElroy was his last name. I don't remember what his first name was. And he, it didn't matter what the weather was. Every Sunday morning, if he had to say something, he would say, "What a beautiful Lord's Day!" It could be raining, snowing, flooding, because it was the Lord's Day, and that's so we got double reasons to be good, be happy today. I'm back 2 weeks in a row. I feel better this week than I did last week, but I'm uh, thanks to Susan's nurturing care and modern medicine, I'm doing just fine. Um, I will. The plan is that I won't be here next week or the following week. We have next week. Susan and I have to attend a wedding in Oklahoma with my for my nephew. A great story, but for my nephew, and he is getting married next Saturday, and so we'll be there. And then the following Saturday, I have my oldest grandson or my youngest grandson is having a birthday. One of them, pick one. They on the same day. They're both, yeah. We're going to be in Texas because both of the, so we'll just be staying in that part of the country for the next week or so, beginning next weekend. So, but Dave Gear will be back. He will be back and has agreed to fill in, and which is just fantastic. I was able to watch most of the class that Dave taught a few weeks back, and it was just really good. And I just really appreciate Dave's wisdom and his heart. He's taught me a lot. If he was here, he would say no, but he's taught me a lot, and I look forward to the time that Dave will be teaching, and I hope to be able to watch those as well. It's fantastic. You can just watch anything, anytime, anywhere. Bad stuff, so don't do that. But you can watch good stuff anytime, anywhere. And there's a lot of good stuff. There's a lot of good. Uh, Susan, I don't know. Our Susan and I, our son-in-law is a preacher, and so he is. We watch him frequently. Uh, he used to be decent, and now he's actually gotten pretty good. So it's not painful to watch him at all. We enjoy it, and we're very proud of him. But yeah, it's good. So we're going to begin in we're going to be in John today. Anybody got a favorite miracle? Mike's not here, but Dave's here. If you need anybody got a favorite? Is there one? I always like that one. None. All the way on the other side of the room, we got a favorite miracle. Dave's going to find out why Mike stays so thin. Here we go.
I'm not 100% sure it's in John, but Jesus raising Lazarus.
Is 100% sure it's the only place
powerful.
It is. John chapter 11.
Powerful.
It's the miracle that does him in. So it's when he does that miracle, they say, it's not my opinion, but they said, look, this is the end. We cannot take this anymore. He's got to die. And so that one, because it was Bethany, very close to Jerusalem. It's I think it's about a 3.5-4 mile walk to Jerusalem. And so there were a lot of people from Jerusalem that were witnesses, and they said, this has got to end. Anybody else got a favorite one? No? The wedding? No one likes the wedding.
I like it because of the mom.
Yeah, it's on.
Yeah, because of the mom. I just love
that.
Oh,
do you like it because of the mom? The mom, okay.
And just the whole celebration. He saved the whole celebration.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that ruins the whole y'all want to just get some coffee? There's no reason. No, but what about the boat? What about when they're in the boat and and they're like, he's just going to let us die, and you think, how's he going to do that? And he, hey, wake up, we're dying. And he said, hey, and man, control over nature. What about the mom who he sees a funeral and her son is dead and and he can't stand it. I mean, I've said this before. Don't ever invite Jesus to a funeral, because he messes up everyone that he ever attended, even his own. So he is not good to have around at funerals, because the main guest at the funeral always starts living. So don't invite him to a funeral. Actually, you better absolutely invite him. He's the only one you need to be there. Yeah. Oh, no, go ahead. No,
Okay.
no.
My favorite miracles in Acts chapter 3 with the lame beggar healed at the temple.
Okay.
And I like it because it says that he was about 40 years old, which means that they all knew that for 40 years he was, it's kind of a cool little detail that they just couldn't dispute it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great miracle. Great example. Jeff has got one at the back.
Yeah, again, I don't have favorites. They're all great, but some unique one to me, when Jesus does a miracle and he doesn't even know it. So when the woman who's having bleeding problems, and Jesus touches the hem of his garment and she's healed. And it's like he didn't even have to do anything. He didn't say, oh, hold on, let me handle this.
Isn't that a great miracle? It says, look, the belief, with just the belief that she had, and that was all that was needed for that miracle to occur, which is just fantastic. It's a great one, Jeff. Yeah, Dave.
I like that one too, because it shows to those of us that didn't get to live and associate with him personally while he was alive, that it's not about proximity. I like the one where the Gentile woman asks for healing, and from the very moment that she had the faith for it, her child was healed.
Yeah.
It wasn't about him being at the location. It was about the faith of the individual.
Yeah. No, that some great miracles, some absolutely fantastic miracles. And as we pointed out, if you want to read a lot about the miracles, then you need to be in Matthew. Oh, we got another one. He has two favorites. He's like me. He doesn't understand what the word favorite means.
Actually, I don't wasn't going to talk about another miracle. What in some of the paintings, or maybe a lot of the old time paintings, you see the halo above different either saints or above Jesus' head. Well, it's obvious people wanted to be next and close to Jesus. Anytime he opened his mouth, there's a crowd, and it's like this aura, not just above his head, but there's something about him that just attracts people. Compassion is one of them, but anyway, there's just, I don't know, it's obvious to people that were there then.
Okay. There's just there's a crowd. There's some things going on. We're going to try to talk through John chapter 2. We're not going to go through every verse. Maybe we'll get into John chapter 3. I highly doubt it. We're doing really not that good at going through John. So I don't know. We've got to kick it up a little bit. But that's all right. We have now officially been studying John longer than the time that it covers. John, the Gospel of John covers roughly what we believe to be 22 to 25 days of Jesus's ministry. If you want to, he is not an exhaustive collection of everything that Jesus did. It's not anything. It's not, if you want to get really into the chronological order and have the whole 3 years, then you're much better off in Matthew, because Matthew is going to go through and he is going to try to maintain that order, and he's all the way from beginning to end. John isn't. John, if you remember, in John chapter 1 is really not hardly much about Jesus's life. It starts out from Jesus being at the beginning, always with God and at the creation, and through him all things were made. And so then it goes into John chapter, the rest of John chapter 1, and it's just one day, the next day, the next day, and the next day. And so those are, if they literally were day after day, or if they were, but they're not weeks or months, they're just days. And so he looks at a day, and now when he begins chapter 2, he says, and then in 3 days, I think is what it says, John, and on the third day a wedding took place. So this is, he's not going to give us all of the detail of the ministry. If we remember, John includes how many parables? None. There are no parables in John. So the number one way that Jesus used to teach, John does not include them in his gospel at all. He says, that's not what I want to talk to you about. Then the number one way that Jesus proved that he was the Son of God, that he had this power, this was, and it's going to come up in chapter 2, is through his miracles. John only includes 8 miracles. 6 of those miracles are unique to him. They only are found recorded in his gospel. One of them that we're going to look at today is only found in John's gospel. Only 2 of them are of the 8 are actually found in any of the other gospels. One is the feeding of the 5,000. I mentioned it last week. It's in all 4 gospels. And then the other one is Jesus walking on the water. It's in 3 out of the 4 gospels. So the rest of the things, which are pretty powerful, are you're going to find in what we call the synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Then when we get to John, John's going to give us something different. And Roger just told us about the crowds, but when we look, especially when we're looking over these next few chapters, and even last chapter when he's with it's not about crowds. In most of the time in John, it's about individuals. And John is wanting us to understand Jesus cares for individual people. And oftentimes he is caring for the individuals that are not, that have no position within that society. They're the people that are on the bottom rungs for whatever reason. And a woman caught in adultery in John chapter 8, a woman that can't figure out how her husband's situation and who she's living with now in John chapter 4. Today, a woman, and next in John chapter 3, it is somebody of power and position, but somebody that's kind of scared or embarrassed that comes at night. So there's a lot of one-on-one interaction. There's going to be a guy that's born blind in a few chapters. And again, it's a one-on-one interaction. So there's a lot of singular interactions that John records in a very few number of days, because he wants us to see Jesus, his best friend. Jesus, the one that John is known as the one whom Jesus loved. And he says, I loved him so much, and I still love him so much. And you need to love him too, not because he is a great teacher, not because he does wonderful miracles, but because he is who he said he is. And he's going to constantly point us back to Jesus being the Son of God through the way that he lived his life and the love that he has for other people. So we look at John chapter 2 today. It says on the third day, in verse 1, on the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee, and Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. All right, so here we are. They're come to the wedding. It's as probably most of us know, it's probably not like a good Church of Christ wedding. Good Church of Christ wedding lasts 30 minutes, and then afterwards you have some cake and some nuts, and you have that punch that has sherbet and ginger ale. I've been to that one. I actually had that one 41 years ago. So almost exactly. But this is going to last longer than 30 minutes. It's probably going to last a couple of days. There's going to be a big party. People have to travel. There's going to be a big event. They're going to do some things, and so they're here. And it says they're at the wedding, and after the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." And, "Dear woman, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied, "My time has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, and the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding 20 to 30 gallons. And Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." So they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now draw some out and take to the master of the banquet." They did so, and the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, "Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink, but you have saved the best till now." This is the first of his miraculous signs Jesus performed at Cana in Galilee. He thus revealed his glory, and his disciples put their faith in him. Okay. All of the great miracles, John includes this one. Maybe he includes it because it's the first. There's a lot of miracles that we have recorded, or more that aren't recorded, is what John says. But there's all of the great things. This is the one that John says, "Hey, I better include this one." When he was sitting out, and I don't know how they did that, but when he's sitting out outlining how he's going to write his gospel, he said, "Oh yeah, I got to include this one. Oh, I got to include that one at the wedding, because that was." I'm not sure. At first glance, it seems a little different that he would include the one. And well, maybe he's like, because it's the first. That's the reason why he wants to do it. So, what's the problem is that the wine is gone, and who recognizes this problem? His mother. His mother is the one that recognizes this problem. And all of you, I got good, most of you can't remember, but all of you were children at one time. So that's just the way it works. And so, or if you have children, chores. Anybody ever asked a kid to do a chore? What's the first thing that they say? Oh, okay. We'll talk to Sam after class. All right. What else? Any other? When children? It's not my turn. I mean, it's my sister's turn. It's my brother. Steve, would you empty the dishwasher? I emptied the dishwasher last time. Anybody ever said that? Or you ever had a child that said that to you? It's your turn to carry out the trash. I carried out the trash the last 3 times. I'd never said that, because if I did, I probably wouldn't still be here. Yeah, that's not a joke. No, we weren't allowed to do too much of that. But I mean, within reason, I think you're misremembering, Mom. It's somebody else's turn. It's not my turn. Yeah.
In the future, John is going to take care of Mary. And I think that relationship probably started even as we're reading this John 2, but John and Mary had a relationship, and it became closer as time went on. And to me, I think that he just includes it because it's his mother. I mean, how do you leave that out,
Yeah, a very strange thing is going to occur. When Jesus dies, John is going to become responsible for Mary, although we know that Jesus has brothers, and he's going to look to John. And again, another pretty much a one-on-one moment there. But we're used to that. We're used to that in our life. We're used to that when you give a child, or you give. And now I got another question for you, and this is why we don't ever do anything, because I ask all these silly questions. When do you stop becoming your parents' child? When you turn into
Never.
Never. I mean, I was my mom's son and every day until she died. I mean, I'm still her son, but if I were at her house, I mean, I think it's last summer or summer before last, our daughter, who is a quite accomplished, independent woman, came to visit us, and she was going to go for a walk, and it was getting at dusk, and we live in a very dangerous neighborhood, and I told her, I said, well, no, don't go down to that park, don't, it's dark, don't go down there. And she just looked at me like, who do you think you are? I mean, she didn't say that, but she's like, I'm a grown person and I walk all the time. If I want to walk at the park, I'll walk at she didn't say any of that. She said some of that, but it was but you're still their parent. It doesn't matter how old you get, that person is still your parent. And there's still a thing that occurs, and there's still something that goes on. Jesus is not a teenage boy that has just been given a chore. He's a grown man, and his mom says, hey, we got an issue. There's not any wine here. And Jesus's response in the NLT, he said, dear woman, that is not our problem. And in the NIV, he says, woman, that's the way I always say it. Woman, why do you involve me? So what are you doing? My time has not yet come. Why do you involve me? And in the NLT, he says, it's not basically, it's not our problem. Yes, they're out of wine. That's not our problem. Here we are. Let's have the wedding. And what does Mary do when Jesus explains that it's not their problem and that it's not his time? She acted exactly like a what? A mom. Isn't that beautiful? A Jewish mom. She acts just exactly the same way that any other mom would act. She says, she completely ignored. I will carry out this trash as soon as this show is over, or as soon as I finish this ice cream bar, or as soon as and then it's just like whatever I said completely didn't register. She said, and you also need to get that now, or get this. I mean, it's just completely ignored what he had to say. Yeah, Dave.
I think it's interesting that at this wedding they're at, I think it was probably someone related to them, because Mary was highly involved in what was going on. She wasn't just there. She was involved enough that someone came to her and said, look, we're out of wine.
You're right. I mean, there's a lot of people have supposed that. I think that's could be. I mean, I'm a big fan of the movie of The Chosen, the series. I mean, but we need to always remember that is just someone's imagination. I think a very good imagination. I enjoy the backstories. I mean, I just really, really do enjoy the backstories. It makes a lot of things come to life, but it's all just somebody pretending or making up. We don't know. It's based on, it's historical fiction is what it is, and which is fine. And it's introduced Jesus into a lot of people. And I think that is fantastic. But and if you've watched The Chosen very early on, it's in season 1, they go to the wedding, and when they're at the wedding, Mary and Jesus have a discussion, which is not the same way it is in the Bible. And maybe they really did have a discussion, and John doesn't include any of the other things. But I love the way that John says, this is what Jesus said. And Mary's response was to not acknowledge her son, but to say to the servants, whatever he says to do, you need to do it. Now, you think about some of the big miracles that we talked about, some of the big things. There were some pretty important reasons. There was a boat that was in danger of capsizing or going down. There was a person that was dead. There was a woman who had been afflicted for her whole life with bleeding. There was a child that was sick and dying. I mean, there were some good reasons. What's the reason Jesus did this miracle? His mother asked him. That was Leanne. I'm going to be sure you get credit. His mother, and Tracy, his mother asked him. It's probably, I mean, it very well could go back to Exodus chapter 20, verse 24. That's where the 10 commandments are. And the 5th commandment says that you should honor your father and your mother. If you don't, the commandments are broken down. The first 3 are about how we are to respond and treat God. The next one is how we are to respond and treat his day that he's set apart and made holy. And then the 5th one is about how we're to interact with our parents. And then it starts in with all the other ones that we shouldn't do. So they're laid out there's a hierarchy of the commandments. So you got 3 that deal with God. You got 1 that deals with God's day. And the next one after that is how do you deal with your parents? And Mary says to Jesus, we've got a problem. Jesus says, it's not my time. Mary turns to these guys and says, whatever he says to do, you do it. And what does Jesus do? He does it. Okay, he did it. Now they didn't need it. What was that? Mary gave her. So Susan's got one. She can put that eyebrow up there, and I know. Whoo, that's now it's time. We get a lot of free dessert at restaurants when she uses that eye. So here we go. So that we are, you can ask her. So she's out here and he says, and so he does it. And like you say, who all knows? Yeah. Who was he impressing? Nobody. He was solving the problem. He wasn't impressed. The guy that's running the whole show, the master of the ceremonies here, he comes and he has no idea about this wine. He has no idea that it's come out. So it's not anything. It's not to save somebody's life. It's not to keep a boat from capsizing. It's not to heal somebody. We're at a party. We are out of wine. This is an embarrassing situation, and I want you to solve the problem. I'm your mom. You're my son. Please do it. And he does. Wanda, over here.
Wasn't that sort of an example of just being an obedient son?
Yes, I think that's why I think it goes back to the 5th commandment that he was doing. He needed to do something for his mom. There was a problem. She asked him to solve it, and she did. It's really, we don't see, I'm trying to think, I don't think there's another miracle that's done for such simple reasons. And it's because he was a son and she was his mom. And it's not probably not the most spectacular miracle. We could get a good magician of the world. He was his mother's son. And when there's a situation, his mom asks him to solve it, he does it. When he's hanging on the cross, he looks at John and he says, hey, I want you to take care of my mom. So, yeah, Dave.
In America, we like to celebrate everything, but we don't celebrate. In Jewish culture, celebrations never were, let's have a party tonight, and then it's over. Everything lasted at minimum 3 days. Most of them were weeks long. And there were celebrations for a purpose. It was all leading up to preparing people for the wedding feast of the Lamb.
Okay. It's a some good points, some good things to draw on there. When so at the next part of chapter 2 is very confusing. We got this beautiful first miracle that occurs in the first part of chapter 2. Then you get to the last part of chapter 2, and you've got Jesus, and he is clearing the temple or cleansing the temple. And this is a source of controversy. And then how can this be a source of controversy? In the synoptic gospels, so this event of Jesus clearing the temple, Jesus clears the temple in every gospel. The difference is John includes it in chapter 2, and the rest of the synoptic gospels, they include Jesus clearing the temple as part of the Passion Week. As he's come into Jerusalem, he goes in and clears the temple. So now you're left with something that you have to make a decision on, and we'll never know what the right answer is. The right answer, the decision is, did Jesus clear the temple twice? Because a lot of people think that he's a 2-time temple clearer. Some people think that he only cleared it once, and John includes it in a different part of his gospel. Or it could be perhaps Jesus cleansed it a lot of times, and we just happen to know about 2 of them. But so John includes this he includes this at the 2nd chapter, and he doesn't include anything later on when Jesus is at the crucifixion or when he's making an entry into Jerusalem. He doesn't include anything about cleansing the temple. So maybe we don't know why, if there were 2 events or if there's one event that's recorded at 2 different times. We do know that John is not particularly concerned with chronological order in his gospel. He is kind of jumping around. He's one day, 3 day. We're going to go, and a little bit later he's going to be at a different time. And so now we're here. If you have a Bible that's got headings, you can actually look at it. It says, you'll find the clearing of the temple in Matthew 21, Mark 11, Luke 19. So these are all at the end of their gospels. And here's John has got a cleansing the temple in the 2nd chapter. I haven't done a lot of deep research on the 2 cleansing versus 1 cleansing argument. And I don't think that it makes a whole lot of difference. On the surface, I think I'm going to probably lean towards the 1 cleansing and John putting it in 2 different places. The reason why some people think that there's 2 cleansings is because the reason that's given in the synoptic gospels is because a different reason. And it's about my father's house is a house of prayer, and these are things I have done, and it's a little bit different in this account. And so people think that, well, that is the reason that there's 2 cleansings, but it may be that it is John records the same cleansing, but he has a view of it that is different than the other gospel writers, which would not be that's not unusual. We've already decided and discovered that John's gospel has a completely different view of Jesus. So he may have been recording the exact same event, but and he concentrated and focused on the things that really made an impact on him, or that would make an impact in his gospel, when the other gospel writers were talking and using it at a different place. Or maybe it's 2 different times. But when we look, it says that after this, so after the wedding, he went down to Capernaum with his mother and his brothers, and they stayed there for a few days. And then verse 13, when it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, Jesus went up to Jerusalem in the temple courts, and he found men selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and others sitting at tables exchanging money. One of the reasons I think I favor kind of a single event is because I don't know at the very beginning of, if we view this as being the very beginning of Jesus's ministry, if he would have had the street cred to go into the temple and doing this and cause all this kind of uproar, if it was at the very beginning of his ministry. I think by the end of his ministry, they were quite afraid of him. They knew he had all the people on his side, or a lot of the people on his side. And so they were completely, they were like, okay, we can't just go crazy and arrest him and do all these things. We've got to plan it out and really execute it in a perfect way. But at the beginning, they could have said, well, look, who is this guy to come in here and do this? So anyway, but he comes in, they're selling these things. And so they have, so he made a whip out of cords, which I don't believe is included in the Synoptic Gospel. So he made a whip out of cords, and he drove all from the temple area, both sheep and cattle. He scattered the coins of the money changers. He overturned their tables. To those who sold doves, he said, get these out of here. How dare you turn my Father's house into a market? His disciples remembered that it is written, zeal for your house will consume me. That's from Psalm, I believe, 68. And then the Jews demanded of him, what miraculous sign can you show that you have to prove authority to do all of this? So he goes in and he sees these people, and they are selling. They've got what did he say? We have both sheep and cattle, and they got the money changers and the coins. And he says, get these things out of here. How dare you turn my Father's house into a market? What was Jesus's problem? Okay, Roger?
His father's house of prayer had been turned into a place of business.
Okay.
As I understand it, the concept of selling animals to Jewish travelers was okay. Seemed okay anyway. But the other problem is and they specifically mention it, the money changers. You had to use the temple coins, temple money, temple gold to buy these animals for sacrifice, and they were really ripping the people off. And I think that's why they used the term money changers. But they were all doing it in God's house, so to speak.
Okay. So John does not include thank you, Roger. He doesn't include the thing about the house of prayer. Yeah, Mark. But it is in the Gospels, in their accounts, if they're the same event.
Well, it doesn't state it here. I've been given to understand that where this happened is in the outer courts. And that's where Gentiles could go, but they couldn't go any further. And so they would worship in that area. So now we've got worshipers and people doing business where worshipers really are. And so I think Jesus is mad because people are totally disrespectful of worship. They're not conscious of worship. They're not conscious of the Gentiles being lovers of God. And so he considers this whole worship is more than just right inside that temple ground.
Okay. Not respectful of worship. Great. Thank you, Mark. Other people? I think there's a lot of all these things are going on, but I think one of the things that we shouldn't lose sight of, especially as we studied through John's gospel, is that there's some of these people, they're having to go and they're having to do currency exchange. And, which if you go into different countries and you have to change money, and I've done that oftentimes, and then you wind up, you get money, you have to pay a charge for somebody that's sitting there and they're making the change and the money. And so you give them so much money and it's supposed to be worth so much money, and they take their cut, they take their commission for making this change. And sometimes, you got all instructions. Don't use these kind of places because they are, don't change it at the hotel because they're going to charge you a lot more commission. Change it at certain banks or change it in advance. All kind. Now you can pretty much use credit cards a lot of places, and so that's just fine. So you don't have to worry about that quite as much. But so you get worried about the people that were taking cut. The other thing is that some of these people were bringing animals in that were good. Yeah, what is it, Chris? Go ahead. According to who? So what Chris is saying is that they were not up to snuff. Do we still say that? Might just get canceled. They were not up the. They had to be unblemished, and according to the people at the temple, you could bring the best that you had, and they would look at each other, yeah, that doesn't pass. And so then, if it didn't pass, you had to go buy another one. So here you've brought the best of what you have. You think that you've satisfied the requirement. You bring this, and they say, yeah, that's not good enough. Tell you what, we'll take that one off your hands, but you've got to get one that is. So you have to find a way to buy one that meets that's temple quality that can go. It's like USDA. I don't know. So you just got to find one that's the temple quality that we can take for a sacrifice. I think John includes this because Jesus's issue is not just in the other gospel writers. If this is the same event, they're going to focus on this is the house of prayer. What are you doing here? I think Jesus includes this. I mean, John includes it here with the perspective of Jesus cannot stand it when you take advantage of people, especially if they are trying to serve God. He cannot stand it. And it's going to come through in John's gospel is that when these people are sincere and things happen, and then when you don't respect them, when you don't show reverence to them, Jesus can't stand it. And that's what John wants us to know about Jesus. Not that he was the greatest teacher, not that he was the most wonderful miracle worker, that Jesus loves us and he loves every single one of us. And that when we're worried about being judged, that Jesus wants to love us. And when he wants to love us, our response to that is just to become overfilled with his love and live a life that does respect him. So, I mean, I think that's what John includes. But I think the reason, one of the other main reasons that he puts it in chapter 2, I believe, is kind of coming up right here in the next verse, and we're about out of time. In verse 18, then the Jews demanded of him, what miraculous sign can you show us to prove your authority to do all of this? So as far as from John's gospel, he's just told us just a few verses ago that the very first miracle, at least it's got a qualifier, but I believe to be the first miracle that Jesus does is at this wedding at Canaan. Now he goes down to Jerusalem and which he did pretty much in secret. The servants knew and his mother knew, but not the guys that were running the wedding didn't know. So then in the same chapter, he goes down to Jerusalem and they say, okay, if you're going to do this, do a miracle to show that it's okay. And so that's why I think it's probably the same event, and John includes it here. But I think the reason he includes it here comes back to Jesus answered them in verse 19, destroy this temple and I will raise it again in 3 days. The Jews replied, it's taken 46 years to build this temple, and you're going to raise it in 3 days. But the temple he had spoken of was his body. And after he was raised from the dead, the disciples recalled what he said. Then he believed the scripture that the words that Jesus spoken. And now while he was in Jerusalem at the Passover feast, many people saw the miraculous signs he was doing and believed in his name. But Jesus would not entrust himself to them, for he knew about all men. He did not need men's testimony about him, for he knew what was in a man. He knew the heart of a man. Look at the contrast here. Jesus is in the temple. He goes in, he causes a major ruckus. It's a big deal. And he really dresses them down. How dare you do this? And then the Jews demanded of him, the Jews, these are the temple leaders. These are the people. Hey, how can you do this? Show us a miraculous sign. Does Jesus give them a miraculous sign? No. Contrast that with the beginning of this chapter. Somebody asked for a miracle. Who asked for a miracle at the beginning of the chapter? His mom. Does he do it? You get to the end of the same chapter and they ask Jesus to do a miracle. Does he do it? No. I think that John includes this here also so we can see the contrast in what Jesus did, so that we can see how much he respected his mom. And then also that he comes in here and he says, look, these guys, he did this. These people are being taken advantage of. He comes in basically to save the day. They say, prove your authority, give us a miracle. And he doesn't, he says, no. He said, do this. I'll show, if you want a miracle, I'll show you one. Destroy this temple and I'll rebuild it in 3 days. He said, yeah, it took 46 years. What a beautiful chapter that John gives us. You think about, again, so Mary and Jesus, as far as we know, it's just a very intimate setting. They have a one-on-one conversation, and he comes and he does what she asks. Then he goes to this other setting and they say, here, prove your authority. And he says, okay, tear this building down and I will rebuild it in 3 days. And that's his answer. And he doesn't give them the miracle. I think it's just a wonderful contrast. Now, next week, Dave will be here and we're going to look at John chapter 3, the most famous verse in all the Bible, John 3:16. So great opportunity, some wonderful things in John chapter 3. I'll also be gone for probably, I don't know how much Dave will get covered in 2 weeks. I'll probably be gone for John chapter 4, which is probably the most beautiful chapter in all of John. So you got you got a great teacher and 2 really great texts to cover the next 2 weeks. So don't miss out on those. Let's have a prayer. Father, we thank you so much for this day. We thank you for blessing us with the opportunity to come and study from your word. Father, give us open hearts and minds as we prepare for worship you, God. We pray that we will lift our voice in song and that we'll just be in awe of your presence, Father. Please be with Randy and with Jeff and say, lead us in today and just put the power of your spirit within them. In the name of Jesus, amen.